Jeff Albright with Independent Insurance Agents Brokers of Louisiana. Mr. Albright, you'll let them welcome to Jude.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members. Jeff Albright with the Independent Insurance Agents. I had all kinds of things that I wanted to say, but I'm going to cut it down to 3 points. Number one, we all agree that we have a problem with high insurance rates. There's been a lot of debate about what the cause of that is. One big debate is we need insurance reform, not tort reform. The fallacy in that argument is the overwhelming majority of states rate insurance exactly the same way we do, because it's actuarially justified principles that we rate insurance on. Has been testified to. It's not going to change the amount of loss and the amount of premiums. You're just shuffling the deck if you change the way you rate insurance. And we rate it like everybody else. Another thing we talk about as well, we got bad roads and we got distracted driving and everything else. They got that in every other state that we compete with. Alabama, Mississippi, Arkansas, whose premiums are half of ours, have all the same problems we have. The main reason large cities pay much more than more rural areas is exactly what Senator Luna said. You've got a lot more traffic congestion, and it is universal. But those states are similar to us in population. They have cities that are the same, very similar in size, but they pay half. Why? It's very simple. Our accident rate and our property damage claim rate, how often we say that our vehicles are damaged, are only slightly higher than the national average. It's not way out of whack. It's not twice as high like our premiums. But our bodily injury claim rate, how often we claim we're hurt, is twice the national average, which is why our liability premiums are #1 in the country. We're #2 now, by the way, in 2017, recent NAIC data. We're #1 in liability and #2 behind the District of Columbia. Michigan, who was #1, has dropped down. Why? Because they did reforms in their legislature, and it has already paid dividends in basically a year. So my point is that the only area in experience, in loss experience, where we're way out of whack is bodily injury claims. And the reason for that is because our judicial system encourages bodily injury claims. I sent to the staff, and I also emailed to each of you this letter from Joe Johnson with United Fire Insurance Company. I'm not going to read it to you. You can read it for yourselves. This was a letter that was sent out to United Fire agents in Louisiana telling them that we're getting ready to shut down our commercial auto business. And the second page of the letter is what I want to draw your attention to. You all have asked, what do real insurance companies think the problem is? I talk to real insurance companies on a weekly basis, and every one of them tells me the problem in Louisiana is our litigious environment. Well, here you got it in writing. Bodily injury claims are twice the national average. Litigation is 60% higher than the national average. Again, I'm not going to read it to you, but you got it in black and white from an insurance company on the record. Let me tell you the other part of this story. About, 10 years or so ago, Randy Ramelow, the president and CEO of this insurance company, called me because we talk. One of the things we do as an association is we try to bring insurance companies into the state because we have a reasonably competitive private passenger auto market. It's not real healthy and competitive, but we've got some markets. You all know what the commercial auto market is like. Senator Cloud knows what the commercial auto market is like. It's awful. It is a crisis, okay? So I am in touch with company executives all the time. Well, Randy Ramelow, the president of United Fire, said, Jeff, we got to do something with the litigation situation in Louisiana. And I don't just want to complain, I want to be part of the solution. What can we do? And we talked about it, and he says, well, we need to talk to somebody in authority. So I set up an appointment with then Louisiana Supreme Court Chief Justice Kitty Kimball. Ramelow flew into New Orleans. I picked him up at the airport, and we went down and we had a pretty good interview. But at the end of the discussion, Chief Justice Kimball said, I don't believe we have a tort problem in our state. And on the way back to the airport to drop Ramelow off, he said, Jeff, I don't think there's anything I can do to help in Louisiana. This company just recently, after this letter, sold its entire personal lines book of business to Nationwide. Now, I'm sure you all have heard testimony. Nationwide is not Nationwide. They don't do business in 2 states, Hawaii and Louisiana. Commissioner Donlan's recruited them, I've recruited them, and they tell us not just no, but heck no. There's an $8 million book of private passenger auto business in United Fire that Nationwide is going to walk away from, given to them as part of the purchase. They're going to walk away from it because they don't want it. That's a serious, serious problem. The last point I will make is this. We can't guarantee X% rate reduction. I don't know any other legislation that you all consider, and outside of utilities, I don't know that the legislature generally tries to set prices for businesses in Louisiana. If you do that for the insurance industry, they don't have to do business here. It's a pretty easy decision what they're going to do. But what I can share with you is 2 success stories that this legislature created. You build it and they will come. In the late 1980s, the Louisiana workers' compensation market cratered. This legislature created an old-style assigned risk plan where all of the workers' comp carriers had to pay their pro rata share in the losses of the assigned risk plan. There were managers of the assigned risk plan who got paid 35% of whatever the premium was. The higher the premium, the more money they made. So they just wrote checks. And the system got worse and worse and worse, and the assessments got higher and higher and higher. And insurance companies said, I'm having too much fun in Louisiana, I'm out of here. And the workers' comp market went down to being extremely uncompetitive. It got so bad that the last year, the assessment for the assigned risk plan was 127%. That means for every dollar of premium the company wrote in workers' comp, they had to pay the assigned risk plan $1.27. Then they had to issue their own policies, pay their own claims. It was last one out, turn out the lights. This legislature got together and they did 2 things. They created LWCC, the Louisiana Workers' Compensation Corporation, to be the market of last resort, and took the assessment off the industry. They also made LWCC a competitive marketplace. But they let insurance companies compete on the business they wrote without the burden of the assessment. Workers' comp companies came back to the state, and since then, workers' comp premiums have gone down and stayed down 50%. What else in your life in the last 20 years has gone down 50%? A huge success story. Success story number 2. After Hurricanes Katrina and Rita, the homeowners insurance market dried up. Companies were pulling back, getting out of the state, cutting back the number of policies they had. And this legislature did a couple of things that was really, really smart. First of all, before Katrina and Rita, prospectively, you all created Louisiana Citizens Property Insurance Corporation. The magic of that is that before that, they had an assigned risk plan, just like the failed workers' comp assigned risk plan, and the assessments would have gone back to the industry, which means they can't make money. Okay. By creating Louisiana Citizens, you took the assessment off the insurance industry. They can compete on their own business. The second thing they did is the legislature was flush with cash after Katrina because we were rebuilding everything in sight. And they put up a little money for an incentive program. We were trying to do all kinds of economic incentive at that time.
We do have 2 senators who want to ask you a question, and we're trying to move pretty quickly, so if you could wrap it up, I'd appreciate it.
Right now. So you created an incentive. We got 6 new companies in. Since then, we have 32 new companies. Homeowners business is competitive, and we're rocking and rolling in that marketplace, and premiums have come down. You all can change the environment, and when you do, the insurance industry responds, and we can reduce auto premiums with this legislation. Thank you.
Okay. Senator Mills?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Albright, how many insurance agents do you represent?
I represent 3,500 agents and about 360 agencies.
And they've authorized you to speak on their behalf here?
They have.
They don't need to be here.
We are all in.
Thank you. This insurance is a regulated industry in Louisiana.
Highly regulated.
If we wanted to lower the insurance premiums, we would be looking forward to lowering the losses that these companies suffer. Is that directly
There's
related?
only two ways to reduce premiums. One is to reduce the cost, the loss cost, and the second is to create more competition. And this legislation will do both.
And if all that happens, the insurance commissioner is obligated to force these companies to lower their premiums?
He has testified to that.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Senator Mills. Senator Cloud.
Mr. Albright, I don't want, well, first, I want you to expand on something you've said when you've testified before, but let me just ask you, on the focus on commercial auto, changing the way that we credit score, and we've looked at gender and all those different factors, would any of those things affect positively the commercial auto rate?
It would have no effect at all. It's not used in commercial rating in any way.
I think I've asked this before. This is the only bill that we've seen this year now, because we're in session 2, that could have a positive effect on commercial.
I wouldn't say that. I think.
Well, no, I had the claims history. That helps. Okay.
Well, it does. I think another bill you're going to consider today, HB 44 by Representative Garofalo, could have a positive effect because it has a strong collateral source. And you asked a question earlier. Collateral source is absolutely the most important piece of any of this legislation for commercial auto, because you have big vehicles, generally bigger accidents, but with more medical expenses, and that's where the real gouge is. That's where they're losing a lot of money.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned nationwide. I told this story before. I ended up at a conference in Florida, and in the hallway, I ran into a lady talking about Nationwide, and I thought she worked for Nationwide. So I stopped her and asked her why Nationwide won't come to Louisiana. What would it take to get you here? Come to find out, she runs Nationwide Insurance, and she had a couple of affiliates with her. And when I mentioned Louisiana, she really didn't want to talk to me, and said, I'm a newly elected senator. What is it going to take? Because competition is key. And she said, fix your broken legal system, and we will talk. In closing, would you tell the quick story about when you go out, what that feels like when you go out and try to solicit new companies?
I'd be happy to. As I said, we solicit insurance companies to try to create more competition. And on a number of occasions, we've gone to insurance company trade association meetings, basically conventions of insurance company executives. We have a booth, Louisiana Insurance Agents, and so the presidents and senior vice presidents of insurance companies are walking by and say, Louisiana agents, what are you guys doing here? So I want to talk to you about coming to Louisiana and do business in Louisiana. And I get two reactions. The first reaction is basically the reaction from the president of Nationwide. Oh no, we know about Louisiana and we will never do business in Louisiana given your legal climate. The really sickening thing is that's the better of the two reactions. About half the people that we try to talk to in the exhibit hall just start laughing and walk away. It's that bad. I'm not exaggerating this. It is that bad.
I believe you. And you and I talk frequently about what else we can do moving forward, because this is basically this bill. Thank the Lord for President Schexnayder bringing this bill forward and putting his name on it, and very pleased that it ain't over. You know, it ain't over. But in saying that, this is laying the foundation, and we'll have more this isn't an end-all be-all. I know that, and we've talked about other mechanisms, other work that we're going to do in the future. We've got to lay the foundation first.
And it sends a heck of a message to the insurance industry that it's a new day in Louisiana, and maybe they need to take a new look.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Senator Luno.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Albright, next time you talk to those people from Nationwide, tell them to quit advertising in Louisiana, and maybe that'll lower their cost and they can reduce rates even more in other states.
I'm with you 100% on that.
Yeah. You know, do we ever talk about how much advertising insurance companies do and how that drives up rates in the state?
It's overall average 1% of premium.
So that wouldn't have any factor in this at all.
Not significant, and like any business that wants to write some business, you have to be out there a little bit to, try to attract business.
We certainly don't want to talk about that and impede anybody else what they do in advertising, things like that. How many insurance companies are there that write auto lines, private auto lines here in Louisiana?
Private passenger auto? I can't give you precise numbers.
Just
What I
give me
would
a
tell
round
you,
ballpark.
yeah, what I would tell you is there's a fairly large number of companies who have private passenger policies, but most of them are not actively writing new policies.
Ballpark. How many?
6 or 8 maybe?
So there are 6 or 8 companies that write automobile insurance in Louisiana?
Let me expand that. I'm thinking in my marketplace, an independent agent. Okay, maybe 10, maybe a dozen at the most.
You think there are 12 companies in the state of Louisiana that write automobile,
I'm guessing.
automobile insurance?
It's not a significant number who are actively writing new policies today.
How many write commercial trucking insurance in Louisiana now currently?
Less than a handful, 2 or 3, maybe 4.
Would you say that's a competitive market?
Certainly not in commercial insurance.
Why haven't we declared it a non-competitive market and took steps that are in place already to help adjust that market and try to get some more people in there?
I can't answer the question, and I'm not sure by declaring it a non-competitive market, you're going to be able to bring new people in here. You're right, there's a regulatory mechanism for that.
Isn't that what it's for when we're in a crisis and we don't have enough?
I think it's certainly something that could be talked about.
Isn't that what it's for, though? Isn't that
Yes.
what the, yeah.
Yes.
What about you talked about the LWCC and Citizens. Do we need a LWCC and Citizens for auto in Louisiana?
What I would tell you is that we have an assigned LAIP, the Louisiana Louisiana Automobile Insurance Plan, which is somewhat similar. It's not exactly the same because it actually is an assessment plan like the old workers' comp and the old homeowners program, but it has like 20 policies in it. So it has not been an effective mechanism.
I guess what I'm trying to get at is you really had a lot of praise for the LWCC and Citizens. Why aren't we proposing doing this? If that's what's going to save us, why don't we do that?
Well, first of all, the magic of both LWCC and Citizens was to take the assessment off of the insurance companies. There is no assessment on the companies for automobile because it has almost no business.
Well, do you think we ought to put an assessment on them? Is that what you're proposing here?
No, sir.
Well, what about those insurance companies that your agents write for? Do they want to see something like Citizens for automobile insurance in Louisiana?
Adding one state-created marketplace, I don't think is going to make a material change. Again, the magic of the comp and the homeowner
Yeah, but what do those
situation.
people that you speak for, what do they say? What do those insurance companies say? Is that what they want?
I've not heard any company say that that's a solution that's going to help them in a significant way.
Then I guess what I'm at a loss of, I'm trying to figure out why you talked about how great those programs were and how much good they did for the state. How does that relate to this bill?
Very directly, because what you did in both of those instances is you created an environment where insurance companies can write business and have a reasonable opportunity to make a profit, and that encouraged insurance companies to come in and created competition, which drove down premiums.
But this
And I
bill
believe
doesn't
this
create
legislation would do exactly the same thing.
This bill doesn't create a risk assignment pool like the LWCC and Citizens does.
No, but what it does is create a healthy environment where they can compete. And next time I go talk to an insurance company about, hey, do you want to think about coming to Louisiana? And they say, oh, no, I know about Louisiana. I can say, no, you don't know about Louisiana, because Louisiana is different than it used to be. We've changed our tort system, and you have a chance to do business in an appropriate way.
I'd encourage you to do that now. Tell them to look at that little company called State Farm and what kind of market share they have here and how they're doing here. The issue about rate reductions, you said you can't guarantee a rate reduction. You were around when we did no pay, no play. How did we do with that? That was a mandated 10% reduction, although it didn't actually go down. Rates didn't go down 10%. But how did that work out for us?
Well, the Talbot bill in the regular session and the Garofalo bill in this session both have a rate reduction. And you can say, well, it's not mandatory because they can appeal to the commissioner. The commissioner has testified, and he's an elected commissioner. He has every interest in the world to try to drive rates down. So if you have a tough enough
14 years he hadn't done that, has he?
Well, he hasn't had a piece of legislation that would reduce expenses enough that they have an opportunity to drive pricing down.
Well, let's go back to my question about no pay, no play. How long did that reduce rates?
A year or two.
About 18 months. And then
Senator
what happened to the
Luna,
rates?
can we keep it on the questions on this bill and not the past?
Mr. Chairman, you don't limit anybody else. Please let me ask my question so I can get through it quickly and we don't do this. I would really appreciate if you would give me that courtesy.
well, I'm just asking you to.
Thank you, sir. The point I'm trying to make is that it was a mandatory rate reduction of 10% for no pay, no play. And then after that rolled off, they immediately went up higher than they were before. How is this different from that? What's the magic bullet here that's so much different from what we did then?
Because no pay, no play was based upon the idea that uninsured motorist was the cause of high insurance premiums, and we were going to put the hammer down on uninsured motorists to solve that problem. Uninsured motorists have almost nothing to do with the reason that our premiums are so high. All it really did was put more pressure on people to buy insurance. This gets at the root problem. You solve collateral source and you're taking enormous cost out of the system without doing significant damage to the plaintiff.
You mentioned earlier that, in fact, you said that the Louisiana judicial system encourages BI claims. How? What do they do to encourage BI claims?
Because we don't provide transparency with seatbelts. We don't allow a jury trial. We don't provide transparency on
And that's
medical
the fault of the
expenses.
judicial system, or is that the fault of the legislature?
Well,
mean, how do the
you all
courts-
create the judicial system. Your laws are the underpinnings of the judicial system. So I was not pointing my fingers at judges and giving a pass to the legislature. The way our legal system is set up and operates makes it easier and more profitable for plaintiffs to bring suits than it does in other states. And our experience and our premiums show that.
You mentioned earlier, too, that Michigan and what they had done to change their laws, and you praised them about what they had done. In Michigan, they prevent insurance companies from using credit ratings and gender for rate setting, don't they? They just passed those laws, didn't they?
They did.
But we didn't do that here in Louisiana, did we?
We didn't because
You testified against those bills, didn't you?
I did, because they're not material to driving down the premiums.
So how has the change in the law helped in Michigan, but it won't change? It won't help here?
There were a lot more changes in Michigan than just gender and credit scoring. Their primary problem was that they're a PIP, personal injury protection state, and they had fairly liberal tort laws on top of it. So in addition to having tort claims, they paid first-party benefits and then third-party benefits, and that drove up the cost.
You know, I got to ask this. Did you support no fault when it was proposed here in Louisiana?
I actually went to the table in rebuttal with Carl Barbier on no fault in 1996.
Good for you. That was the right call to make on that one. Thank you.
No, I went to the table in support of the bill in opposition to now Judge Barbier.
Well, then maybe you didn't make the right decision on that, because those have failed miserably across the United States.
And I agree
haven't
with
they?
you 100%. It was a bad decision then, and it would be a bad decision now.
Yeah, I think you're making a bad decision today, too. You mentioned the amount of wrecks and the amount of claims and all those kind of things in Louisiana. First of all, you said that all have the same issues with wrecks in Louisiana. But I just read to you some statistics a while ago, or not to you, but to, in this room,
Right.
that ranks Louisiana as the fourth worst drivers in the nation. I mean, we obviously, that has to factor in somewhere, does it not? We don't have the same wrecks that they have in other places. We're fourth worst in the nation.
Well, I don't know how you evaluate fourth worst drivers. What I'm looking at is
I don't
the
know either,
claims
but-
experience.
Okay.
Our actual number of claims and our actual number of property damage claims are a little higher than the national average, but it's not way out of whack. Our bodily injury claims.
That's not what I'm talking about. Our driver. Will you talk specifically about our drivers and that kind of stuff? And this comes from CarInsuranceComparison.com. Have you ever heard of that? That's an industry .com. You ever heard of that?
I've heard of it. Don't know that much about it, but
Well,
okay.
that's who rates us, the fourth worst in the nation. And the statistics look pretty bad.
And that's fine, but if we've got bad drivers, that will ultimately be expressed in the claims experience. And the claims experience indicates that our bodily injury claims are completely out of line with the other experience on number of accidents and number of property damage claims.
Give me just 1 minute. I think I'm almost through. Thank you, sir. That's all I have.
Thank you, Senator Leno. Okay, the board is clear.
Thank you very
So
much.
Thank you.